This presentation, titled Auditing: A Consultant's Perspective, comes to us from Christy Mazzarisi. Christy is a Global Quality Officer for the Quality Unit at Rational Vaccines. She's an innovative and accomplished quality systems professional with a broad background in pharmaceutical and laboratory sciences, specializing in business development with R&D and commercial manufacturing, sterile and non-sterile experience, spending more than 15 years in industry practice and 8 years as a consultant for top-tier pharmaceutical companies. Her overall background and specialties include GMP and GLP, which has led to strategic management of major programs such as gap analysis and transformation of annual product review systems, SOP transformation and optimization, QMS frameworks, and operational systems audits. She's also the chair of ASQ's Women in Quality Forum, which caters to building leadership skills in the quality profession across the sciences. And with that, take it away, Christy.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. Again, my name is Christy Mazzarisi, and I'd like to kind of give or elaborate a little more on my background a little bit so you understand where this presentation is coming from. So besides being in pharma for a little around 17 years or so now, the last 8 years I've been consulting and leading various quality and compliance departments for different consulting firms. So I thought through that lens, and as my time as a consultant, that it would be useful to share my perspective on auditing and what the future could look like. In my time consulting, I have been able to see a really good high-level view of how small to large pharmaceutical companies handle their day-to-day processes, their QMS systems, and auditing. So I thought this would be a really interesting look at auditing and what tools we have for the future. So out of this session today, I'm hoping that once you finish listening to the presentation, you're going to gain a better understanding of some of the main challenges that we have as auditors. Whether it's remote or on site, I think the challenges somewhat remain the same. How to handle some of those challenges and what tools we have across the intelligent automation spectrum that can aid in our auditing journey and what risks come with those new tools. So to start, I kind of want to go over some main challenges that we have as auditors. But before I go over the 4 that you see here on the screen, I want to talk a little bit about what I see as a high-level challenge that I think we have across the entire industry when it comes to auditing. And I think it trumps most of the 4 that you see on the screen. And that is the fear that is instilled within individuals when they hear they're being audited. And I think that's more of a cultural shift that us as auditors really need to change that culture within the industry. People get scared. The fear is very real. I tell people I'm going to audit them, and the first thing that happens is they panic and they're scared and, oh, Christy's coming to audit us. That's a problem. We better get ready. So I think that with auditing, we need to help shift that mindset, because auditing is really a positive support, right? It's a positive functional support area to help improve, whether it's within their own organizations or whether it's consulting for other organizations and auditing for them. It's our job to help them improve, right? To help find gaps in their processes before regulatory bodies do, right? And it's our job to really keep our clients and ourselves in good standing with compliance standards and support each other to continually improve. So that's a paradigm shift, I think, that we need to do better at across the industry, because auditing really shouldn't be a scary thing. And I'll touch on that again in the next couple of slides. As for the 4 challenges on the screen, we'll dive into each one a little bit more. So the first one, and I could say this for myself, and I'm sure you'll understand it as well, is that it is really hard to keep up with the ever-changing regulatory landscape. It's hard to keep up with the knowledge of the regulations, the interpretation of those regulations, and on top of that, managing various inspector expectations that continue to shift with every change. So on top of knowing the regulations, or at least knowing where to go, you have to also manage different inspectors' viewpoints. One inspector to another could shift and change, right? So we have to always be invested in learning. I think being an auditor is really more of an educational job duty than it is anything else. We are learning always, and we're always teaching. So to me, that is one of the hardest challenges and one of the hardest ones I've seen across the industry with various clients of mine. The second one is around communication. So communication gaps create an increased risk during auditing, not just for the auditor, but also the auditees. So there could be misunderstandings with the questions that we ask each other when we're auditing, and that could create an increased risk of not being able to find issues during your audit. You may use different terminology across different companies. So one thing I like to always mention is when using acronyms during an audit, try not to, right? Or at least ask them to elaborate so that you understand how one organization uses a term versus another. Also, if you're, let's say, a contracting auditor or a consultant auditor, if you have communication gaps, that can cause some scope creep for you as an auditor. And that is now something extra you'll have to manage during an audit. So that could take you completely off course of your original agenda. So communication is extremely important. The next one is poor quality oversight. So I would say over the last year and a half, post-COVID, is where I've seen the most trouble when it comes to oversight from a quality perspective. And I think that's due to having to shift so quickly to virtual environments and remote working, which has caused some new challenges in itself. I think we're in a better place today, but I could say the post-COVID environment has really changed quality oversight and how we go about that within our organizations. So poor quality oversight leads to harder audits. It creates more work for us as auditors, and it creates, I think, more teachable moments where education becomes key here for us to provide the education to the stakeholders that are handling oversight and help them understand how to do it better. And the last challenge, but definitely not the least, I think they're all equally challenging. I've also seen with a lot of clients and a lot of organizations, they have very minimal inspection readiness programs or processes in-house. And I think that makes it a really tough job for us as auditors, because now there's going to be many more issues to work through than if you were with a company that has a very robust program. And a company that believes in a culture of quality and continuous improvement will have more control over their people, processes, and systems than a company that doesn't. So it's really important to have a good inspection readiness team and a program, because that will help audits go much more smoothly. That also will help alleviate that fear that I was talking about before, the fear that comes along with knowing you're going to be coming up for an audit. The more prepared you are, the less fear you should have. So it's all about preparation and practice. So are you prepared for an audit? So I think that is the biggest question for a company that's being audited. Are you ready for an inspection? Or is it going to be a free-for-all when the time comes? So here on the screen is just a high-level look at what a reactive organization looks like versus a proactive. If you look at the reactive side of things, there's a lack of control, right? And I think that for the organization, it takes a large effort of internal resources to be diverted from value-added activities to support fixing items on the fly when they know an inspection's happening or they're being audited. It's definitely not best practice to be fixing things on the fly, but it happens and it's a reality. Also, reactive organizations, again, audit's a scary word, right? And you'll see this theme throughout the presentation. And it's only scary when organizations are not prepared. So last minute prepping is really not ideal. And that instills the fear into the employees while they're trying to scramble to get up to speed for the pending audit. So I remember years ago, when I knew I was being audited, I used to be a little nervous. And I used to pray to myself that I don't miss something or forget something, or maybe not even being able to find a document that's requested. So the fear is definitely very real. And that's something that we need to change by shifting to a more proactive organization. And one other thing that reactive organizations tend to have problems with is finding their documentation. And I think that kind of says it all for itself. That's the most simple and basic concept in a regulated industry such as pharmaceuticals. Being able to find documentation in a timely manner is really important. Then on the flip side, we have proactive organizations. And I tend to not see that many. I see a lot of companies trying to make that shift, but it is a slow go. And I think it's up to us as auditors to really support them in that transition. So a proactive organization, as you see, the first bullet there is practice makes perfect. I know we tell our kids that all the time, but do we actually practice what we preach? So that to me is really important. I believe in practicing your inspection readiness program daily, maintaining those controls, and really maintaining audit preparedness within your organization. And it is a daily practice. So it's not something that you can just do on the fly. Schedules are always created for internal audits in proactive organizations, and they continue to monitor those and double check them and make sure they're always prepared should an inspection or an audit occur. Their documentation is easy to find. They have good organization within their document control system. And most of the time, what I've seen in proactive organizations is that their documents are already in a QC'd state. So there's no extra QCing that needs to happen. There's no fixing things the day of the audit. Everything's already in good standing. And the last item is that they have proof of continuous quality improvement coming from their internal audits. They show and document that they're always looking to improve, and they're putting their best foot forward. So we know as auditors, no organization is perfect, right? But it's about showing that you can improve and showing that you want to improve. That is the important piece. So trying to shift to a more proactive organization is something that I think we can support our clients in as we move forward in the future of auditing. So what does the big picture look like? So I like to call it a puzzle. There's 4 pieces of the inspection puzzle that you really need to think about when trying to overcome the challenges that, I just touched on over the last couple of moments. As an auditor or as an organization, I think these are the 4 main items that we need to focus on. I'd like to start off by talking a little bit about oversight and governance. So part of the puzzle is really having sufficient rigor over your internal governance and oversight frameworks. You want to prove that you have control over your people, processes, and technology. And you want to be able to prove that to inspectors and auditors alike. So as an example of having good oversight and governance over your processes and your people and your systems is by having a quality management review board. So that's a way, as an example, just one example, to show that you have proof of oversight and you have involvement of senior leadership, because really that's where quality culture begins, and it begins at the top, and you have to lead by example. So by having a quality management review board and by documenting those discussions, the slides, whatever you do during that time in your meeting minutes and outcomes and activities, that is a way to prove that you have oversight over what's going on in your organization. The next one I want to touch on is technology. So one thing that I like to do when I support clients from the consulting side of the job that I do is to perform an assessment internally over all the tools and technology that you have for your main or critical capabilities. So what I mean by main and critical capabilities are items such as your quality management system, your RIM system, your regulatory information management system, or your CTMS, your clinical trial management system, et cetera, systems like that. And ensure that they are fitting the needs of the business and your business goals. and ensure that they can scale and shift in the future. So one thing that I find as I've gone through a lot of technology assessments over the last year and a half or so is that this is most critical for your manufacturing and quality units during an inspection and or an audit. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. And if you don't feel you can perform that assessment yourselves internally, if there are organizations out there who can help you do that, and it's okay to have support. So the next one is metrics. So we all talk about metrics, when we wear our quality hats, it's something that we like to have, we like to look at, right? Trending in metrics. But having robust metrics defined for your critical items are going to be most important. And when I talk about robust metrics, what I really mean are proactive measures. So not reactive, how many CAPAs we have, what classifications they were. That is a little bit more on the reactive side of things. We're trying to focus on proactive measures. So you want to demonstrate growth and improvement over time. And proactive metrics can really assist you in this space. And it also helps lessen your risks during an audit because you're able to identify trends up front of something actually occurring. And that's really what we need to be looking at when we look at metrics. And the last piece of the puzzle is inspection strategy. So I have noticed that many life science organizations don't really understand their operating models within their own organizations or how that model relates to their supply chain and their vendors. So one way to help you ensure that your operating model aligns with your inspection strategy is to map out your supply chain, map out the supply chain, the vendors, and the processes, and how that relates to your company objectives. So that's a really good way to help identify potential gaps in your organization and also help you define a shift in your inspection strategy where you can start incorporating quality perspectives. So I recommend this highly to clients, friends, when they're trying to become inspection ready. I think it's really great to document this process, create an inspection team, and then drive that strategy. And if you document all of this and you document the mapping, you can use that as proof of a plan during a real inspection or an audit. So it's all about documentation, right? So documenting this mapping and then using that as your plan to build a more quality culture into your inspection strategy. So out of this four-piece puzzle here, one thing I want everyone to take away is don't wait to prepare for an inspection by doing these four things while preparing your marketing application. At that point in time, it's a little late, and then you'll be scrambling to try and prove a lot of these things. So you want to prove your organization is really built upon a culture of quality. And I think the earlier you start preparing, the better. And it's really never too early to start putting together an inspection readiness team and program. So as an auditor, what can we do to support our clients better and towards the future, right? There are a lot of emerging technology tools out there that can help us perform better, not just as auditors, but also help our clients overcome a lot of the challenges that they have with auditing. And emerging tech is really the way a lot of companies are going today. And I think at a much faster pace than they were pre-COVID. COVID has really shifted the pace of digital transformation in an organization. Now that a lot of us are working from home or part-time from home, or whether we're outsourcing a lot of operations and our supply chain being global, and that creates some additional challenges, and emerging tech can help get through those. So what that means is we have the technology in front of us to be ready for an audit, to build that culture of quality, while also making auditing more efficient and more proactive in nature. So I would say what I've seen over the last year and a half and in this post-COVID environment, that companies are digitally transforming to keep pace with the ever-changing regulations. So virtual working is our new normal, right? And I think emerging tech can help us be in a better place. So intelligent automation is the spectrum of emerging tech. So it can range from robotic process automation or RPA all the way through artificial intelligence on the other side of the spectrum. There's tools in between, and there is a tool or a mix of these tools that can fit your auditing needs. So intelligent automation too, for those of you who are not well-versed in it just yet, it can do much more than just repetitive tasks or administrative tasks. So keep that in mind when you're trying to figure out what type of technology can fit your use case. So at the end of the day, one thing I like to mention is when looking at emerging tech, think about your use case, not about the tools itself, because there will be tools that will fit your needs, but it's all based around the solution you're trying to achieve. And if you do not have a good emerging tech department within your company, there's so many consultancy companies out there that can do this with you. So you don't need to do it alone. There is support. One thing to mention too is that besides your repetitive tasks, intelligent automation can also support you do more knowledge-based activities. So that's where you would start learning more about natural language processing, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, because that's the more mature side of the spectrum when it comes to knowledge activities and being able to have bots that can think on their own and do things on their own and learn on their own. Whereas RPA or robotics process automation is on the lower end of the spectrum. And that's really good for more of those repetitive tasks or administrative tasks. So as an example, if you look at the slide here, there's a couple examples of where emerging tech can support you, from automated response tools, non-conformance detection, real-time monitoring, data entry, and mobile capabilities. So those are just a couple examples of where the future of auditing can go with emerging tech. So I want to kind of explain one example that I've used over the last year or so of a technology that I have deployed for a client, where they had RPA bots developed, and we developed these bots to automatically enter their audit observations for them. And it was where the bot would get the audit report, it would read the audit report, and it would automatically take all of the observations from that audit report and put them directly into the tracking system or that company's system of record. So this allowed auditors and auditees to focus on more value-added activities rather than entering data of each one of those observations. So you can imagine if you are a large company that does maybe 200 to 500 audits a year, how helpful this could be and how much time and cost savings this could be to you if you had a bot that can enter all of those observations for all of those 200 audits for you. That is a lot of time saved and a lot of time that now your teams can go spend on, let's say, the root cause analysis and the CAPA planning for the audit observations rather than entering the audit observations themselves. So I know this company was thrilled once they had this put into place, and they couldn't imagine life before bots. So there are ways that this can help you. Another example that I've seen deployed in the industry is being able to have consistent oversight by using real-time monitoring or issue detection. That is a big one. And that goes along with the being more proactive in your organization, because real-time monitoring and issue detection can help you identify things up front, right? So for this to happen though, there is some homework that has to be done on an organization's side and some upfront work. There's two things you need to really be in place before you can use something like real-time monitoring and issue detection. And that is by having good, reliable data being captured that is easily accessible. And the second thing is by having harmonized processes and systems within your company. Especially if you're a multi-site company, you can't have the sites using two different QMS systems or two different ways to track metrics and track data, because then it's going to be a lot harder for bots to be able to access your data, to be able to put together this connected analytics platform. So as an organization, having good, reliable data is important, and having it in one spot and having harmonized processes and systems in place. If those two things are done and that homework's been completed, then you can start putting into place a connected data analytics system to really have a good holistic view over your entire supply chain and start detecting those trends and issues in advance. So those are just two examples of how emerging tech can help us in the future of auditing. But as we know, with new technology comes new risks. So we'll talk about that a little bit shortly. So with these new tools, we have new risks and new challenges that we need to overcome as auditors and organizations. And we have to understand how to handle those from a day-to-day basis. So as auditors, I think we need to start learning the new risks that come along with intelligent automation. We understand that they provide greater efficiency and cost savings in the long run, but how do we mitigate risks? So as a quality professional, right, our first thought is risk mitigation strategies, right? And we must put interim controls into place as we implement new tools. So on the screen are 3 ways that you can help mitigate risks while deploying emerging tech within your organization. The first one is really having QA support. So have quality be part of the implementation process from the beginning. This way, they can help you find areas of risk up front, help the team come up with proper controls for them as well. They can also support you by having proper KPIs, key performance indicators, decided and agreed upon upfront so that you can all be following the same framework that you're using to validate these new tools. And validation becomes another risk, right? How do we validate these? What does that look like? So really being able to have quality support up front can help you work through all of those questions. And they will be able to document those risk assessments for you in your quality system. So definitely get QA involved, get them involved at the beginning, less rework at the end. The second thing is performing your internal audits. So once a tool has actually been implemented, and let's say used for a certain iteration of time, so that you can start to see the new process put into work, perform an audit on that process. And that will help you see if there's any gaps that you have missed. And then you can start putting new controls into place and additional mitigations to fix any of the risks that you have found throughout the process. This really supports the organization's continuous quality improvement lifecycle. And we should always be looking to improve, especially as auditors. So this is one thing that I think is key, and it should be done during your testing phase, during implementation of this tool. And the third one is governance. So we've talked a lot about governance already. And as you can see, it's a really important piece of the puzzle. And governance over the process and the tools is really important. It's about ensuring that appropriate stakeholders are involved every step of the way. So because, if you think about it, the stakeholders who want this new tool to fix their process, they're going to be the ones who really know what's required of that bot or of that tool in emerging tech, right? They are going to know what their functional area needs. But the problem that we see a lot, which is a big risk, is that there isn't sufficient governance over who owns the tool, who owns the process, and what their responsibilities are during implementation of emerging tech. So I see this a lot in industry, especially over the last year and a half, is that there is a lack of true and clear ownership over these intelligent automation programs, which puts governance and oversight of the process at risk for the organization. I also see a lack of QA involvement from the beginning, which is where the risk mitigation should really be occurring at the beginning. And then it gets lost in the shuffle, and then QA gets involved later in the game, which now creates rework, because QA is going to come in and they're going to see issues, and they might see gaps that maybe you didn't see. And you may have to do some rework, which then is going to take you back on your timeline and maybe even your resources and your costs. So save your clients and your organization's time and money by having QA resources up front and ensuring proper governance structures over new programs when it comes to emerging tech. And make sure that you have a division of responsibilities. I think those are going to be the top 3 things and areas of risk you need to watch out for and start learning more about. So it has been a pleasure sharing with you today. One thing I like to leave everybody off on is the note here on the screen is that quality really sets the foundation of a quality culture. And for any organization to be successful, quality needs to be owned by the whole organization and really embedded in its culture. And that starts with you. So, put on that quality hat when you're auditing and really try and shift that fear of auditing to something more positive. And again, building that culture of quality is really going to start with you. So thank you again.
And thank you, Christy Mazzarisi, for an auditor's perspective on the auditing function. And that concludes this presentation.